As the possessed villagers fell under the combined power of Chidinma and Izndu, a heavy silence settled over the battlefield. The water swirled around Chidinma's feet, glowing faintly, before receding into the river. The dark mist began to dissipate, but not entirely. Chidinma clutched the glowing stone in her hand, its warmth now familiar. Her breathing was ragged, her body trembling from the effort of summoning the river's power. She looked at Izndu, who stood tall, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any lingering threat. The shadows had retreated for now. "Is it over?" Chidinma asked, her voice shaky. Izndu shook his head solemnly. "No, this was only a test. The shadows sent their weakest to measure our strength. The real battle is still to come." Chidinma's heart sank. How do we fight something like this? They can take over anyone, even the innocent. How do we know who to trust? Izndu placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm and grounding. "We don't. That is why you must continue to grow stronger. The shadows will try to exploit every weakness they find. They will test your resolve, your loyalty, and even your love for the child you carry." His words struck a chord deep within her. She had felt the stirring of the child's power during the battle, a presence far greater than her own. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. What would this child become? Could she protect it from the forces that sought to use it, or worse, destroy it? Before she could voice her fears, a faint whisper echoed through the air. It was soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but it grew louder, more insistent. "We see you, river god. We see your bride. The child will be ours." The voice sent chills down Chidinma's spine. She spun around, her eyes darting to the shadows cast by the trees, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Izndu's face darkened. "Yes, the shadows are speaking directly to you now. They know who you are, Chidinma, and they will not stop until they have claimed what they believe belongs to them." The next morning, Chidinma and Izndu returned to the village to find it in chaos. The battle by the river had left its mark, not just on the land, but on the people. Whispers spread like wildfire, rumors of dark spirits and strange powers. Some villagers accused Chidinma of bringing the shadows upon them, while others begged her to protect them. "Why is she still here?" one elder shouted during a heated gathering. "Since she arrived, we've had nothing but misfortune. First the portal, now the children disappearing. She's cursed. She saved us last night," another villager argued. "Without her, those dark spirits would have destroyed us all. She's not cursed, she's blessed." The crowd erupted into shouts and accusations. The once unified village now split into factions. Chidinma stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart heavy. She wanted to defend herself, to tell them she had no control over what was happening, but the weight of their fear and anger silenced her. Izndu stepped forward, his voice booming over the noise. "Enough. The shadows feed on division. If you turn against each other, you will make it easier for them to destroy you." The crowd fell silent, but the tension remained. Izndu's gaze swept over the villagers, his expression hard. "You may blame Chidinma for what has happened, but she is the only reason any of you are still alive. If you drive her away, you will seal your own doom." The villagers murmured among themselves, their fear evident. Chidinma felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't asked for this power, but it had brought danger to her and everyone around her. Could she ever truly be part of the village again? Later that evening, she sat alone by the river, staring into the water. The reflection staring back at her didn't feel like her own. The girl who had once dreamed of a simple life in the village was gone. In her place was someone she barely recognized, someone tied to powers she didn't understand. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to protect my home. Why does it have to be me?" The water rippled, and for a moment, she thought she saw a face staring back at her, a face that wasn't hers. It was faint, almost ghostly, but the eyes were sharp and piercing. She gasped, pulling back, but the image vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The next day, the mysterious figure from the shadows returned. He appeared at the edge of the forest as Chidinma was gathering water from the river. This time, he didn't hide beneath his hood. His face was illuminated by the morning sun, revealing a sharp scar running down his cheek. His eyes, dark and intense, locked onto hers. "You've seen them now, haven't you?" he said, his voice low. "The shadows." Chidinma stood, clutching the stone instinctively. "Who are you? Why do you keep following me?" The man stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "I am a relic of a forgotten time, just like the portal you unlocked. But I'm also the key to understanding the war you are now part of." His words made her heart race. "What do you mean? How do you know about the portal?" "Because I was there when it was first sealed," he said simply. "I fought the river god long ago, before he was bound to this domain. I was the one who trapped him here." Chidinma's eyes widened in shock. You're the warrior. The one who imprisoned Izendu." "Yes," he admitted, his expression unreadable. "But I failed to finish what I started. The river god may be bound, but the portal remains open, and now the shadows have returned. If they succeed in their plans, it won't just be this village that falls. It will be both worlds." Chidinma shook her head, disbelief and confusion warring within her. "Why are you telling me this? Why now?" "Because you are the only one who can stop them," the warrior said. "The river god has grown too weak, and I no longer possess the strength I once had. But you carry the portal's power within you. You carry its future. If you fail, the shadows will consume everything." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. She didn't want this responsibility, but it was clear she had no choice. The fate of her world and the child she carried depended on her ability to fight back against the encroaching darkness. Chidinma and the warrior sat by the river as he explained the true nature of the portal. It wasn't just a gateway, it was a prison designed to contain the shadows and their destructive power. But when Chidinma had unlocked it, she had unknowingly weakened the barrier, allowing the shadows to slip through. "There's a way to seal the portal again," the warrior said, "but it will require more power than even the river god can provide." Chidinma frowned. "More power? Where would we find that?" The warrior's gaze flicked to her stomach. "The child. His power is unlike anything this world has ever seen. But using it comes at a cost." Chidinma felt a cold knot form in her chest. "What cost?" The warrior didn't answer immediately, but his silence was enough. Whatever the price was, it would be steep. The warrior's revelation weighed heavily on Chidinma. She spent the night pacing in her hut, her thoughts a chaotic swirl. How could she harness her child's power without knowing the cost? Could she even trust the warrior, a man who had once sought to destroy Izendu? As dawn broke, Chidinma knew she couldn't afford hesitation. The shadows would not wait for her to make peace with her fears. She resolved to train, to grow stronger, and to find a way to protect her child without sacrificing what was most dear to her. At the riverbank, the warrior awaited her. He held a long staff, its wood dark and smooth, engraved with intricate symbols. "Today we begin," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "The power within you is raw, untamed. If you are to wield it, you must learn to control it." Chidinma squared her shoulders, determined. "I'm ready." The warrior nodded and began. "The test of focus. Close your eyes," the warrior instructed. "Feel the river around you. Hear its whispers, its strength, its fury." Chidinma obeyed, shutting out the world. The sound of the river was constant, a rhythm that pulsed in her ears. It was soothing at first, but as she delved deeper, the whispers returned, chaotic and urgent, like voices calling from across a great distance. "They're louder now," she murmured, her eyes still closed. "They will always be loud," the warrior said. "The shadows want to distract you. They thrive on fear and doubt. Push past their noise. Find the current that connects you to the portal." Chidinma inhaled deeply, focusing. The whispers grew sharper, more insistent, but she pushed them aside, searching for something deeper. After what felt like an eternity, she felt it, a steady pulse like a heartbeat beneath the river's flow. It was faint but unmistakable. "I feel it," she whispered. "Good. Now, hold on to it." But as she focused on the pulse, the whispers turned into screams. Images flashed in her mind, the possessed villagers, Obi's lifeless body, and the shadows closing in on her unborn child. Her concentration faltered, and she gasped, her eyes flying open. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "The voices are too strong." The warrior frowned but didn't scold her. "That is why we train." Again, the river god's warning. As the days passed, Chidinma's training continued. Each session was grueling, pushing her to the limits of her endurance. She learned to summon water from the river with a single gesture, to bend its flow to her will. Yet the power of the portal remained elusive, always just out of reach. One evening, as Chidinma rested by the river, Izendu appeared. His form shimmered in the twilight, his presence as commanding as ever. "You've been training with a warrior," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. Chidinma nodded. "He's helping me understand my power." Izendu's expression darkened. "Be careful, Chidinma. The warrior has his own motives. He may claim to help you, but his past actions speak louder than his words. He knows more about the shadows than anyone else," Chidinma argued. "If I'm going to protect my child, I need his guidance." Izendu stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Your child is more than just a weapon, Chidinma. He is a bridge between worlds, a force of both creation and destruction. Do not let the warrior or anyone else turn him into a tool for their own ends." Chidinma met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. "I won't. I'll protect him, no matter what." Izendu studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But remember, the shadows are not your only enemies. Trust no one, not even me." Despite her training, the shadows were relentless. Another attack came without warning, this time striking at the heart of the village. The possessed villagers moved like a coordinated force, their movements eerily synchronized. They swarmed the central square, their black eyes glowing with malice. Chidinma was at the riverbank when the screams began. She rushed back to the village, her heart pounding. When she arrived, the scene was chaos. Fires raged, villagers fought desperately, and the dark mist of the shadows hung heavy in the air. "Chidinma," a voice called. She turned to see Kim, one of the few villagers who had remained loyal to her. "They're everywhere. We can't hold them off." Chidinma clenched her fists, the stone in her hand glowing faintly. She raised her arm, summoning the river's power. A surge of water erupted from the ground, crashing into the possessed villagers. They screamed as the shadows were forced from their bodies, leaving them dazed but alive. But for every villager she saved, 2 more fell under the shadows' control. The battle was spiraling out of control, and Chidinma felt the weight of her limitations. She wasn't strong enough, not yet. A new ally. As the battle raged, a blinding light pierced the darkness. For a moment, the fighting stopped as all eyes turned to the source. From the edge of the forest, a figure emerged. She was tall and regal, her dark skin glowing with an ethereal light. Her hair flowed like liquid gold, and her eyes burned with a fierce intensity. "I am Amara, keeper of the flame," the woman announced, her voice echoing like thunder. "I have come to aid the bearer of the portal." Chidinma stared in awe as Amara raised her hands, summoning a wall of fire that pushed back the shadows. The mist recoiled, and the possessed villagers fell to the ground, freed from the shadow's grip. "Who are you?" Chidinma asked as Amara approached. "I'm a guardian, like you," Amara said, her tone gentle but firm. "The portal's power is not yours alone to bear. Together, we will face the darkness." After the battle, Amara explained her origins. She was a guardian of the flame, a power that mirrored the river's energy. For centuries, her role had been to ensure that the shadows never escaped the portal's grasp. When Chidinma opened the portal, Amara felt the shift and knew she had to act. "The portal is not just a prison," Amara said as they sat by the fire that night. "It is a balance. The river and the flame, creation and destruction, must work together to maintain harmony. When the shadows were sealed, the balance was lost. Your child is the key to restoring it." Chidinma frowned. "But why me? Why was I chosen?" "Because you are the only one who could awaken the river's power," Amara said. "The shadows knew this, which is why they fear you. But they will not stop until they have turned that fear into control." Chidinma felt a chill run through her. The shadows weren't just after her child, they wanted her as well. The village lay in a fragile quiet after the latest attack. Smoke from smoldering fires curled into the starless night sky, a haunting reminder of the shadow's growing power. Villagers moved cautiously, their eyes darting to every shadow, every corner that seemed unnaturally dark. Chidinma sat near the fire with Amara and Ndu, their expressions grim. "We cannot continue like this," Amara said, breaking the silence. "The shadows grow bolder with every attack. They are probing, testing our strength. Soon, they will bring their full might." "They're after the child," Ndu said, his voice low. "And they will stop at nothing to get it." Chidinma felt her hands instinctively rest on her growing belly. A sense of urgency coursed through her. "What can we do?" she asked. "How do we stop them?" Amara glanced at her, her golden eyes gleaming in the firelight. "To defeat them, we must understand them. The shadows are more than mindless chaos. They have a leader, a being that controls them. If we can confront this leader, we can weaken their hold." Ndu nodded, his expression dark. "But the shadow's leader is no ordinary foe. It is a creature of pure darkness, older than the river, older than the flame. Facing it would be a death sentence." "Not if we prepare," Amara countered. She turned to Chidinma. "But to face it, you must unlock the full power of the portal. You must learn to wield both the river's energy and the flame." Chidinma's heart sank. She was barely managing to control the river's power. How could she master another force entirely? But she knew hesitation would only invite more destruction. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly. The next morning, Amara led Chidinma to a secluded clearing in the forest. Unlike the lush greenery of the riverbank, this place was dry and barren, the ground cracked and scorched. At its center stood a single tree, its bark charred black, its branches lifeless. "This is where the flame resides," Amara said. "It is not like the river. The river is fluid, adaptable. The flame is fierce, untamed. It will demand more from you." Chidinma stared at the tree, doubt creeping into her mind. "How do I even begin?" "Feel the heat," Amara instructed. "It lies dormant, but it is there. The flame is always waiting, always ready to ignite." Chidinma closed her eyes and reached out, just as she had with the river. At first, she felt nothing. The stillness of the clearing was oppressive, heavy, but then faintly she felt a flicker, a spark buried deep within the earth. "There it is," she whispered, her voice trembling with wonder. "Draw it out," Amara said, her tone firm. "But be careful. The flame is wild. If you lose control, it will consume you." Chidinma focused, pulling at the spark with her mind. Slowly, the air around her grew warmer, the heat rising in waves. The charred tree began to glow faintly, its branches trembling as if alive. Then, with a sudden roar, the tree burst into flames. Chidinma stumbled back, shielding her face from the intense heat. The fire danced wildly, its light casting strange, shifting shadows across the clearing. "Good," Amara said, her voice steady. "But you must control it. The flame is a weapon, but it must also be a shield. Focus." Chidinma took a deep breath, steadying herself. She extended her hand toward the fire, willing it to calm. The flames flickered, resisting her command, but gradually they began to shrink, their wild dance slowing. Finally, the fire settled into a steady burn, its heat no longer overwhelming. "You have done well," Amara said, a hint of pride in her voice. "But this is only the beginning." As Chidinma trained with Amara, Ndu took it upon himself to investigate the shadow's growing power. He ventured deep into the forest, following the trail of dark energy that lingered after the recent attacks. The air grew colder as he moved further from the village, the trees twisted and lifeless. Eventually, he reached a clearing shrouded in an unnatural darkness. At its center stood a stone altar, blackened and cracked, its surface etched with strange symbols. The air around it pulsed with malevolent energy, a stark contrast to the calm of the river. "This is their anchor," Ndu murmured. "The place where their power converges." He stepped closer, his hand glowing faintly as he summoned the river's energy to shield himself. But as he neared the altar, a voice echoed in his mind, deep and resonant, filled with malice. "You cannot stop us, river god. The portal is ours. The child is ours. You are nothing but a relic of a fading era." Isendu's jaw tightened, his anger flaring. You underestimate me. The voice laughed, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground. We do not fear you, O god, but the bearer, she is different. She carries the key to our salvation and your doom. Before Isendu could respond, the shadows around the altar surged, forming into a massive, writhing figure. It lunged at him, its claws swiping through the air. Isendu raised his hands, summoning a torrent of water to repel the attack. The force of the clash shook the clearing, the shadows hissing as they met the water's touch. But even as he fought, Isendu knew he couldn't destroy the anchor alone. He retreated, his mind racing. The shadows were growing stronger, their influence spreading. If the anchor remained intact, the village, and the portal would fall. Isendu returned to the village, his expression grim. He found Chidinma and Amara near the river, their training interrupted by his arrival. There's no time, he said urgently. The shadows have an anchor deep in the forest. It's the source of their power. If we don't destroy it, they will overwhelm us. Chidinma's heart sank. She had barely begun to grasp her powers, and now they were expected to face the shadow's stronghold? How do we destroy it? She asked. With both the river and the flame, Isendu said, his gaze shifting to Amara. Together, your powers can break the anchor's hold, but it will not be easy. The shadows will defend it with everything they have. Amara nodded. Then we must act quickly. Every moment we wait gives them more time to strengthen their forces. Chidinma swallowed her fear, her resolve hardening. I'm ready. Isendu placed a hand on her shoulder. We will do this together. The river, the flame, and the child you carry, all are connected. Trust in that bond. As they prepared for the journey, Chidinma felt the stirrings of the child within her, a faint but comforting presence. It was as if the child was reassuring her, lending her strength. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it, not just for herself, but for her unborn child and for the village that had become her home.